with Creative2xmom Mom, and today's video is going to be all about the books we read in the month of July. So welcome back to my channel. My name is Robin and this is Creative2xmom Mom. This channel is all about homeschooling, parenthood, and thriving in the day-to-day. And today's video is going to be about some really good books. At the end of each month, I post a video like this one, sharing with you the books that I read, as well as the read-alouds that we did with our kids. Now, the summer months tend to be heavier reading months for me because, as you know, we homeschool moms don't always have a whole lot of time to read, and our family follows a traditional schooling schedule where we have summers off. So in June and July, sometimes the beginning of August, I do a lot of reading. So hang in there with me. I got a lot of books to share with you today. So like I said, I have quite a few books to share with you this month, and I've divided them into a stack of nonfiction and a stack of fiction. I always felt like I loved reading fiction. I was a lit major, but as I've gotten older, and I think Homeschool did this, I tend to find that my nonfiction pile gets pretty big as well. So we'll start with this one. This is Bomb by Stephen Sheinkin, S-H-E-I-N-K-I-N. On my summer reading list, I had a book called Fallout, and it was about the Cold War and post-atomic bomb era. Well, I did some research and I found out that this book actually comes first. This is a young adult literature, and it goes through the nonfiction account of how the atomic bomb was developed, how people were recruited within the United States, some of the science behind it, why it was so secretive, and why the Russians were trying to steal all the secrets, the spies that they had in these facilities, the things that they did, and the double lives that people led as well. I found this book really fascinating. For a young adult fiction book, it took a very hard concept, brought it down to a little bit more understanding, and made the history really, really relevant. So I keep a list of resources for every volume of Story of the World that we do, and I'm going to add this to the volume 4, which is the modern age. At that point, my son will be in junior high, and I think that this would be a really good book for that junior high level, especially since it brings history to life. Carrying on in the nonfiction theme, I have Beyond Piggy Banks and Lemonade Stands. This is How to Teach Young Children About Finance and They're Never Too Young by Liz Fraser. I was sitting in the library one day waiting on my 10-year-old son to finish doing what he was doing, and this book happened to catch my eye. Now, my husband and I are all about teaching our kids finances, teaching them to manage their money well, teaching them to invest and how to save, but also how to give. And so I thought I would grab this to see if there was anything new and what I thought about it. Now, this book tends to focus on younger ages. Of course, kind of the title says why they're never too young. And it's split into two different age groups. I would say preschool, kindergarten age, and then the second section is probably 1st through 5th grade. But it goes through some really important concepts that even if you're not really comfortable with your own finances, you can get comfortable with your own finances and teach your kids at the same time. So some of the topics that are covered is why do we have money? How do we get money? This would be for those younger ages. And then in the older ages, it talks about using your allowance, how to divide your allowance, why you should give your kids an allowance, teaching them to save and to share, what are economics, bringing economics down to a lower level so they can see the big picture of how they fit into the economy, advertising, debt, taxes. Of course, these are all things that even as adults we sometimes struggle with. Each chapter has a brief synopsis of that concept, and then goes into some beginning vocabulary, how you teach your kids the actual vocabulary. And then each chapter also has an activity. It could be something as simple as counting out money, seeing what the coins look like, all the way up to starting a bank account, starting a business, learning to give to charity, learning that giving back can be finances or time. A lot of the concepts in this book our children have moved beyond, but if you have a younger child and you're just starting to teach them about finances, or if you kind of are unsure yourself and want some guidance, really cute book to check out. I would check your local library. Carrying on in nonfiction, I also read Teaching from Rest. This is by Sarah Mackenzie. I have read this book a few times, and I'll be honest, the first few times that I read it, I thought, I don't understand the hype. I don't understand why everybody loves this book. It felt so kind of wishy-washy, open-ended, didn't have a lot of direction, but yet I knew that people loved it. In fact, at one time I even owned this book and I sold it because I didn't find a lot of value in it. For whatever reason, I happened to pull this one from my local library. It's only like 85 pages, so I thought, okay, easy, quick read for over the summer, maybe I will get something out of it. This time, it just, I don't know if it's where I'm at in my journey, but it just hit me completely different. And Sarah Mackenzie talks about not necessarily not doing things, not being a neglectful homeschooler, but finding that inner peace and knowing that you're on a journey with your kids, and knowing that reflection and character and this whole journey of homeschooling and raising children just takes time. I think we expect to implement a system and a routine and to see instant results, but she's saying, hey mamas, take the pressure off, that you can walk in obedience, you can walk with confidence, and if you are walking in obedience, allow life to take care of the rest. Trust your kids to come along in this journey. This was exactly what I needed to hear this summer. I don't know if I will ever be in a place again that this book will hit me quite the way it did, but in this reading I thought, okay, I get it now. I get what she's trying to say, and that you are on a journey with your kids in this homeschool business, and find your peace, find your rest. It is possible. So that was the nonfiction pile. Let's throw in some fiction. Throughout the month, I was, of course, reading these challenging books, getting some history, getting some good financial concepts, and then I was giving my brain a break with some great fiction, really enjoying the craft that some of these writers have perfected. Now, I think it was back in May, I shared with you a series of books about a town where an EMP had been detonated over the US, and how this town would survive. The first book was called 1 Second After, and I will link my video, I can't remember if it was May or June, where I talked about that book. And it's part of a trilogy, so I went ahead and picked up book 2, which is 1 year after, and this picks up that same small town almost immediately after where book 1 left off, how they are trying to survive. And we start to find that things are not quite as they appear. The main character has always been leery of the leadership in the nearby town, but he has to work with them in order to get supplies that his town needs. So he starts to see some cracks there, and they start to learn some of the information that is coming out about these rural towns is not so flattering. They're being painted in kind of a friction type scenario. And so people are coming in and thinking that they are bringing this town into law and order when the town is actually what is being kept together. So they have to align with another group that they've been at odds with for the past year. And aligning with that group is what's going to bring them through this next wave of survival. I wasn't sure, because usually in a trilogy, book 2 kind of hits a lull and you're doing more character and story development and not quite as much action. However, this book was action-packed and left me definitely interested in book 3. Like I said, this series is so out of my box. It's a little gritty, a little rough to get through, but very, very gripping. Even in book 2, this book kept me engaged with the character in the town all the way. I found myself pulling for characters that I didn't think I would be championing. So, very good book, very good series. This one's 1 year after, and this is number 2. The next book that I read was The Adventures of Robin Hood. This is the original Adventures of Robin Hood by Roger Lancelin Green. This is the original author. I have never read this book, but we are going to be going through the Middle Ages, medieval times in the fall for our Story of the World. And I was just finding, I shared in our read aloud list, there was too many good books for that time period. I couldn't fit them all in. So I assigned this to my 10-year-old, and then I thought, hey, I'm 42 years old. I've never read this book myself. I want to find out what all the hype is about Robin Hood. And I have to say, it was definitely a fun adventure story. There were times that I felt like a little too much, a little bit too much of the on to the next adventure. But if you've never read it before, I guarantee you will love it. The funny thing is, as I was reading it, I couldn't help but picture Robin Hood as a fox, and Little John was still a bear. For those of you who've watched the Disney classic, that's who they are, and that's who they remained even as I read the book. The next fictional book that I read was called Belle by Sarah Price. Now, I just happened to be searching on Amazon one day and I came across this series of books by Sarah Price. There are retellings of old fairy tales, but with an Amish twist. And Belle was the first one in this series. So I went ahead and picked it up from the library. And you go through the story of this young lady. Her family has fallen on hard times. Her dad is an inventor because he didn't feel like the farm life was for him. And one day he goes out and he's in this horrible accident. So the man who rescues him sort of becomes the family beneficiary. He offers to purchase the farm for a price. If she will marry him, then he will save the family farm. This man is a recluse. Nobody's ever seen him. He was burned in a fire when he was very young, and he was always told that that was a curse because the same fire killed his mother as she was trying to save him. So he has stayed on his own farm, away from everybody else, doesn't go in for the services. The bishop seems to be okay with that, goes out and visits him, and she ends up leaving her family, marrying this man, and leading a very solitary life. And it's how they have to learn to communicate, to trust each other, to come together in this marriage. I love the idea of taking classic fairy tales and giving them a twist, especially if you've read the original classics. They have a lot of detail in them that you don't always get from the cartoon version. However, this one was very, very heavy-handed, and I expected it to follow the fairy tale. I expected it to have a lot of those elements, but this first book was so heavy-handed in its references to the fairy tale that it almost felt comical. It was not my favorite. I liked the story, but it became so predictable because the author stayed so in lockstep with the fairy tale that my interest started to wane at the end. I will, however, say that because of the concept, I went ahead and got book 2 and have started it. This is Ella, which is the story of Cinderella told in an Amish retelling. It follows the fairy tale a little bit lighter, and this book has been a lot better. Now, I got through Belle. It piqued my interest enough that I went ahead and got number 2, but number 2 so far is proving to be a lot more interesting than number 1, only because it seems like the author's putting a little bit more of her own spin on it, not being quite so heavy-handed with the fairy tale elements. And I have one last fiction book to share with you, and that is The Prince and the Blight. So this book is number 2 in a series as well. This is the Dream Keeper series, and these books have been review books for me. I will link my review to book number 1 and book number 2 down below. The review for number 2 should be up in the time of this video. This book, again, picks up right where number 1 left off. This young girl has come home after rescuing her father from the dream world. He was a dream keeper. He helped people in their journey of their dream life, but he was trapped because there was evil in the kingdom that was trapping him there. In book number 1, she saves him. Now in book number 2, she has come home, but she has discovered her own gifts in the dream world, and she is anxious to go back. Particularly, she is anxious to go back and meet the prince. Now, as you read along in these books, you find that they are sort of not an allegory, but a metaphor for the salvation story, because this prince takes on a very Christ-like role in this young girl's life. She is able to go back into the dream world, and she finds out that there is a sickness, a disease that is causing everything to deteriorate, and that evil has resurfaced in the dream world, and there has to be a journey taken to get rid of this blight, to get rid of this disease that is taking over and causing everything to crumble. It's her journey. It's her journey with her friend Cedric, which is this lovable dragon who is constantly fighting against the stereotype of being a dragon. He doesn't like to be categorized as an evildoer. And it's all about her and her friends saving the dream world. I will link my full written review down below, but these are middle grade novels, and I would absolutely have no problems passing these off to my 10-year-old son. I think he would love it, and there are no red flags as far as a parent is concerned for any questionable behavior. Just a great story to get engaged with. So let's talk read-alouds. This was an interesting month for read-alouds. I shared in our read-aloud video that we were going to be reading Ice Whale by Jean Greighead George. At the time of that filming, we had started it. We got maybe halfway through this book and ended up putting it down. My husband is the one that's been doing our reading aloud lately, and he and I were both looking at the kids thinking, I'm not sure that they're tracking this one very well. And the problem is that Ice Whale flips back and forth between two voices. There's the voice of the boy, and then there's the voice of the whale. And doing it as a read aloud, the kids were getting lost in who was who, because you have a lot of unusual names, unusual places, unusual events, and doing it as a read aloud, they were sort of getting lost in the timeline. The other thing that he mentioned that I didn't notice, because he was reading it aloud, sometimes there is these written squiggle notations, and you don't always know, it's usually when the whale's speaking, you don't always know what he's saying, and so my husband would have to pause, read ahead a little bit, and then kind of go back and try to fill in whatever that word or that phrase was. So for us, we ended up putting this one down about halfway through. I think I will go back and read it personally, but to read it as a read aloud, we were all just getting so lost. So from there, just a few days ago, we picked up The Green Glass House. This is the story of Milo, who is an innkeeper's son, and all of a sudden in the middle of winter, the doorbell starts ringing and ringing and ringing, and all these mysterious people show up. So that is what we have picked up. It's sort of a mystery, just a fun, light read to get our summer, to keep our summer going, to keep our summer momentum, and the kids are having fun with this one so far. So that's all the books I read throughout the month of July. Thanks for hanging in there with me. I had quite a heavy reading month. As far as August goes, I am working my way through Ella by Sarah Price. And I think for my nonfiction read here pretty soon, I'm going to pick up Fallout, which will be book 2 behind Bomb, and that will focus on the Cold War. I'm interested to see if it's as interesting as Bomb was. Leave me a comment down below and let me know, do you read aloud with your family? Do you like to read yourself? And what are you reading these days? I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time. Bye guys.